Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Tactically Misguided. My name is Pat. With me, as always, is my co-host,
Lobo.
So for this episode 30, Dirty 30, Cold War and Stopping Communism. So this is going to be part one of our first series, well, mini-series, I guess. So part one of 3 on Operation Condor. Now, that's kind of a touchy operation. It's not widely known, and I'm glad that we're doing this. Going through my own research, I found barely any other videos on this too, talking about it. So it's definitely something that needs to be put out there, and for all of us, like everyone in America, especially, to be aware of that happened and actually was still going on up until like 2000.
Yeah, the effects are still long lasting because this was the 80s. This was about the time that I was just before I was born.
Yep. So with that, this is our new studio. So I hope you guys like it. Hit us with a couple of comments and let us know what you think of it. Before we get started, as always, we're going to hear from our sponsors for this episode. Savage Tacticians is a lifestyle apparel company that is 100% veteran owned and operated to the last detail. They have everything from gym shorts, jeans, tack pants to kick-ass designs for swim trunks that go matching with their Hawaiian shirts. But most notably for sure are their graphic tees. If you want some really well-fitting attire that looks badass as hell 100% of the time, then head over to savtac.com and check them out. Be sure to use our promo code TM10 to get 10% off your order and show some love to us as well as our friends over at Savage Tacticians.
Bulkhead Energy. Don't be a pussy. Bulkhead Energy is an energy drink that has nootropic properties to provide power, clarity, and mental acuity of a ninja with a flamethrower. We can roll the dice on gas station boner pills or a parachute pack job, but we shouldn't gamble on our energy drinks. Be the reason it takes multiple officers to arrest you. Piss off that liberal college professor. Run that belt until the barrel starts glowing on that machine gun. And show the world that drywall never stood a chance. No one gives a fuck about your shitty day. Down some Bulkhead Energy and get some.
All right, with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and kick it. Operation Condor. Now, I know that you guys noticed in the beginning of this, we put a content warning. Like I said, this is a pretty touchy operation that happened. So we want to put it out there, make sure everyone is aware before we start doing this episode. Mainly part 2 of the 3-part series is going to be a little bit rough as we go along through it. So if you're easily offended, tune out. If you want to gain some good knowledge on this, tune in. All right, let's kick it.
Yeah, smash
set that. This one's going to be setting the scene.
Setting the mood.
Setting the mood.
We'll light some candles and throw people out of helicopters.
Oh God.
No, it's a touchy subject, and it's kind of the same, like what's going on with Israel and Hamas right now. So, like, if a lot of people out there don't want to hear about this because there is a grotesque amount of physical and sexual violence that was involved in Operation Condor, but it's basically evil exists. When we look at the how we build a social order for the future, how it's secured by sovereign countries in order to bring peace. Stability rests on the idea that war isn't needed. We can look at how the leftists and leftist ideology has destroyed the world. How many, in a percent, how many wars were over religion in human history since we started from keeping track?
Well, I actually had this conversation with Jameson on Saturday. Mm-hmm. So my belief was always that a large majority, dating all the way back to the Crusades, was all involved with religion. Now, that's not to say that a lot of that is actually just a front. It's to say that religion is the reason, but really it's all about power and money, which inevitably is what it always turns out to be. Not so much religion, and religion is used as a face and a front for a lot of wars. Mm-hmm. And that's dating all the way back to the existence of war.
Mm-hmm.
That's
But
my opinion.
on a percentage, out of 100% being every war and 0 being no wars started.
I'd probably say like 70.
Drop that 0. It's
7%.
7%. 7 to 12 if you consider some of the animistic religions, because there's a fine line between religion and culture before we had organized religion. So it's about 7%. So the overwhelming mass slaughter of human beings was mainly predicated on politics. And if we look at what we would consider the post-modern industrialization period, it's overwhelmingly on the left. There's also some monarchists. People like to say left and right. They'll say Nazis were right-wing because they were fascists. Well, fascism is like an adjective. It's not fascism. You can be a right-winger and be a fascist. You can be a left-winger and be a fascist. But the problem is the unit of measure that we use are the Nazis. Like everybody calls everybody a Nazi.
Yeah.
Like with what's going on in Hamas and Gaza between Israel, a lot of people are throwing that around. People don't understand it's the national German or the National Socialist Workers' Party of Germany was the Nazis. They were leftists. Communists were leftists. We look at the overwhelming slaughter of human beings and its politics. So if we could go back and fix something, it's just we'll talk about this and we'll basically explain how everything works. We look at what's going on now in college campuses, within our religion, within sports. We look at all these things that are happening, and people are crying out. They're like, hey, we have to be careful about the people on the left because overwhelmingly the violence starts there. I can't agree with the methods. We can all use the analogy of dealing with Nazis. With communists have killed so many people that it's not even funny. There are basically these lazy college kids that are proto-fascists. They're proto-Nazis.
Yeah.
Le Vivre Noir du Communisme, or the Black Book of Communism, along with other reputable political scientists and historical scholars, have put the death toll at about 150 million. With some piss poor criticism on this subject. There will people that will be out there saying that 150 million human beings didn't die because of communism, and it's a flat out lie. It's the same kind of people that talk about the Holocaust, that deny the Holocaust. Those same people.
Wait, Germans?
Those same people that would deny the Holocaust are the same ones saying that 150 million human beings haven't died from communism. One of them, her name's Kristen Godsey. She's an evil twat waffle, but a lot of the rebuttals that are in modern discourse, she will sit there and try and refute it. And she's basically tit for tat the same as one of those Holocaust deniers. So she's a piece of shit. But if you add everything up on the body count for the left, it's 150 million. This doesn't include deaths from labor camps like the gulags and the re-education camps, as well as the Ukrainian genocide, which was just so fucking evil. Like, I will joke about a lot of stuff, but I won't joke about that. 5 million Ukrainians basically were starved to death under Stalin's collectivization efforts. And then you also take into account Mao killed 80 million Chinese with his Great Leap Forward. So you can look at those two numbers put together. That's 85 million that were killed by starvation from the left.
So, like I said, when I was like doing my research in on this, now, so gulags and on the re-education camps, when this all started, before it wasn't even called Operation Condor.
Mm-hmm.
It was called Operation Condor in the classified documents that the U.S. had, because we had knowledge of the whole fucking thing, but we didn't do anything about it.
Well, no, we created. Are you talking about knowledge of the gulags?
No, knowledge of Operation Condor.
Yeah,
that entire time.
It was our brainchild.
But gulags, that didn't exist then, did it?
The term?
Yeah, because this technically started in 1969, 1968.
Technically, yes, but it started in, I'll get to that, but it started in 1975 is like when you can say it definitively started, because there was preparation of the environment and the battle space beforehand. So there were decades
And
of us grooming military leaders down
the
there.
military dictators in South America that collectively came together to
but
move on with this. But
we look at the just sheer death and destruction brought by the Nazis and the communists and all these leftists. And it always starts off with identity politics, and it starts off with these college kids that are like, well, I have a brand new idea. It's not brand new. It's going to be great for us. It's not. And people will thrive in a utopia. You're creating a fucking prison camp. So if we could, like, let me just point blank ask you, if we could go back and kill 30,000 Nazis to prevent World War II and the Holocaust, and those Nazis being some men and women, most of them probably not even armed, like street gangs. If I could kill 30,000 people to save the millions of lives that died in the war and the Holocaust, I would. And I think most people with like a working frontal cortex would say the same. You kill a bunch of Nazis to save a lot of people. We essentially did that. That's what Operation Condor was. And communists and Nazis are the same exact thing. They're leftists, they're socialists. And under Engels, Marx, and Lenin, the goal of socialism is communism. I don't care what any fucking college student with purple hair says. And that's not to say that I'm pro-worker. I believe in social policies. I believe that, you should not have to work and slave every day of your life for a subpar existence. So I'm behind a lot of the organizations for workers. I don't fully believe in unions. I think unions are bad because you have teachers unions that are destroying America. You have police unions that are destroying police departments. Unions are not a good thing. Now, having a social network that has the workers' rights in mind is great. But once you start getting people out in the street on picket lines, then it morphs into paramilitary organizations. And the next thing you know is you have terrorist bombing campaigns and people are disappearing. And that we are lucky in America that we had Judeo-Christian values and we didn't have a king. We killed our king. We didn't kill him, but we got rid of them. And that's why we are the way we are. We used rhetoric. We used reason. We used all of our founders were all of our founders for this country understood and practiced different aspects of stoicism. Now
even looking into that in preparation for the episode with Mark, that's still very prevalent, and basically every person that's ever fucking served in the military, that's their mindset.
There's
for a large part. Large part.
There's a lot of drones out there, but it's good to get information out there. And people, the moment that you criticize something, you'll immediately be labeled a racist. Or if you're arguing against the left, they'll be like, okay, so you're not for the left, then you're right, you're conservative.
Exactly.
Two things can be true at once. Leftists can be pieces of shit, and I can have a neutral position on it. But Operation Condor was a portion of the Cold War from 1968 to 1989 and really kind of picked up in 1975. In modern terms, Operation Condor is essentially a targeting program of disappearances, assassination program conducted by intelligence and security services of South American countries to combat terrorism and subversion. It was mainly aimed at communist or socialist activists, political elite. In the United States and in the European intelligence agencies, we contributed training and funding of the operation. So we did a kind of buy through and not so much with. So
we rode the gray area, basically, because you can't, again, going back to some of the stuff I was looking into, like you can't even really definitively say that we were a part of Operation Condor because of us riding the line.
We were puppet masters.
Yeah, exactly.
We definitely made that happen. This is
through the alphabet, boys.
This is very similar to the European counterparts. And the European operation of this portion of the Cold War was called Operation Gladio. That's the one for Italy, but we kind of group it all together. It becomes colloquially known as Operation Gladio. Each country in Europe that was on our side or we were trying to make on our side was part of that, from Greece to fucking death squads and Belgian supermarkets. Essentially, Operation Gladio and Operation Condor, these are just their umbrella terms because we'll make a giant plan of action and then we'll have small subsets of it. And we kind of talked about a little bit about the ability to kill evil people so they don't kill more people. Do a little bit of some nastiness to make sure that, you know, people aren't living in Holocaust environments like concentration camps. Much like the Hiroshima bombing, a lot of history has been left out, mainly because people that run the media are pieces of shit. We firebombed.
Tell me something new.
We firebombed and we nuked Japan. We killed 250,000 people when we firebombed Tokyo. We killed so many more people in Japan to get them to stop running around Southeast Asia, raping and murdering people.
And that's been, even that in itself has become a controversial topic.
Absolutely.
Like the Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
They were all pissed off about that.
Yeah,
They're like, oh, that's like us making a Barbie movie involving the Twin Towers. No, fuck, it's not.
No, yeah.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, the Japanese people and a lot of the apologists for the Imperial Japanese, you say who was more evil? When it comes to race, the Japanese were far more racist than Nazis. Nazis had coalitions and they would do really weird shit like say, you know, you may not be Aryan, but you're an honorary white person. They wound up taking over and creating their own, within the Axis powers, you had Romanians, Hungarians, Bulgarians, the entire Baltics, you had Latvians, Lithuanians, Estonians, you had different minorities such as the Ukrainians, the Kavash, different Turkic peoples, you had Muslim and Christian and secular Nazis. They built a coalition of assholes, pieces of shit. Now the Japanese were just straight up fucking racist. And in my opinion, both of them are evil, and trying to measure the metric between them, you add in Stalin and the communists, they're just as evil. The majority of the countries involved were Bolivia, or for Operation Condor, were Bolivia, Uruguay, Paraguay, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, and Peru. In order to put all these players and pieces out on the chessboard, we have to actually talk a little bit about the overarching conflict, which was the Cold War between the Warsaw Pact, which was the USSR. Yeah. And they're Soviets. A lot of people say Russian, but it's the United Socialist Soviet Republics. And we're going to basically call them the Eastern Bloc versus NATO and the United States, which were, for the most part, democracies or colonial powers. So they weren't fucking democracies. We just kind of lumped them in there. Colonialism's bad, and we're not making excuses for the U.S. or meddling in South American affairs like the banana republics. Like, we did a bunch of horrible shit in our own doctrine down there. But from
now we're not talking about the apparel store, right?
No.
I've done some bad things in Banana Republic.
We basically created Panama because we wanted a fucking canal.
Sorry, this is not a joke at all. Continue.
It boils down to several factors of the Cold War, which is essentially with the United States and NATO and democracies, the liberal democracies versus the leftists, the communists and their ilk, which are responsible for the largest slaughter of human life on Earth. We touched on religion being about 7% of wars and conflicts, 12 if you can kind of blur the line between religion and culture. It's overwhelmingly been political or ethnic when it comes to human beings just slaughtering each other en masse. So with the backdrop of World War II, there was the decolonization effort. The decolonization of Africa occurred after World War II. That's why their fighting in the 50s, 60s, and 70s occurred after World War II. But we look at the decolonization of South America. It occurred in the 17 and 1800s. That's 200 years difference and pre-industrial to like our modern microwave societies. Yeah. So they had more of a jump start. Like compared to Africa. Africa still has people in living memory that were under colonial rule. You can't do that here in South America because they were getting their independence just shortly after us. So they had a little bit more room to mature and grow as a society and build up on that.
Yeah.
We have to talk about Simón Bolívar. He was born in Venezuela in 1783. He's basically the Napoleon freedom fighter of South America. He learned warfare in Europe during the Napoleonic Wars, and he helped coordinate revolutions. He started in Haiti and Venezuela and also did Jamaica. And he followed with the Greater Colombia, which created Ecuador, Bolivia, and Peru. So basically everybody except those fucking weirdos in Brazil, the Portuguese, which is not a real fucking language, can attribute themselves to Simon Bolivar. He was like the George Washington on steroids. In fact, Bolivia named their country after him. Colombia had a sword. If you ever watch Narcos, there's an episode where Simon Bolivar's sword was taken by some guerrillas. He's a very important figure in human history, and he's completely glossed over in American history books. So he basically gave the middle finger to Europe and said, we're going to do our own thing. And that mindset, basically the same mindset we have with our founding fathers, how Americans are like, you're not taking my guns. I'm going to live free or die. You know, it's very similar in that Simon Bolivar shaped the psyche of modern South America. So with Japan conquering European colonial powers and the Nazis taking over in Europe, the colonial powers that have been kicked out were trying to reestablish themselves after World War II. So a bunch of Europeans owned a bunch of places and all over the world. And then the Nazis and the Japanese kicked them out. And there's a power vacuum because then the socialists moved in and the old European powers are like, we want our shit back.
Which is, I guess that would kind of attribute to like our rush to get to Berlin versus
kind of. It's like
versus the Red Army.
It's like
when the
French owned Vietnam and then they lost and then the Japanese moved in and then we beat the shit out of the Japanese and then the French tried to come back in, but communism had crept in. Like that, and you look at the Indonesia was owned by the Dutch. Dutch got their ass whooped in World War II and then got occupied by Nazi Germany. And then after the war was over, so the Japanese took over Indonesia, and then the Japanese are like, okay, well, we lost, so here's your island back. So then this is the most bullshit thing I've ever heard, is a bunch of fucking ex-Nazis who were killing Dutch resistance fighters. So two complete opposite groups became the Dutch Foreign Army and then went back to occupy a country. Like they just got done being occupied by fucking Nazis and fighting each other, and then they teamed up to go oppress the Indonesians. That's the story of fucking Europe. It's bullshit. We kind of flip-flopped between European colonial powers and Japanese occupation, and the same thing goes with the communists in Europe. The vacuum was filled with leftist ideology, is the communist bloc. To go down the list would be difficult, but we can talk about the civil war in Greece with the communists who were defeated, the human rights abuses that occurred in Poland, Hungary, Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Albania, Romania, East Germany, and Czechoslovakia, and throughout the Yugoslav Republic, or the Yugoslav SR, and several other Central Asian countries within the USSR. We can also look at the Chinese Communist Party that invaded Tibet, and we can look at how the Soviets went into Afghanistan, how they attempted to influence Angola, Mozambique, Congo. We can look at the Derg in Ethiopia, all of these being terrible losses of human life. And we can look at Indonesia and Malaysia as well in the right way of fighting communism. And we can look at how Vietnam kind of went wrong for the communists. Went wrong because of communism. We can look at the Iranians and how the Shah basically a monarchy took over, and then they were also influenced by communism. We can look at Burma, Myanmar, even Thailand, Laos, Cambodia. They had their own genocide. I'm just painting the picture that this is globally. Communism is filling these vacuums and just slaughtering hundreds of millions of people.
Which is exactly why we got involved.
Exactly, yes. And when we look at it's a fucking genocide. The linchpin of South America was when, for us taking action, is when Cuba fell to Fidel Castro. And initially, he wasn't socialist or communist. He was just a revolutionary. And he basically invaded from Mexico into Cuba to throw off a piece of shit named Batista. And Batista was backed by us. So we were kind of the bad guys. And then we were replaced by even worse bad guys. And then he proceeded to kill every single homosexual and turn the land over to people that had no idea what they were doing, and nationalizing the industry. He basically went full commie retard. And we could see these gears turning because of those revolutions. We also have to look at Africa because this happened and was heightened in the same period of time. Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam had different outcomes. Indonesia was a religiously motivated anti-communist activity that left over 1 million dead. It was pushed hard by the CIA. The Malaysian emergency that occurred about 10 to 15 years before Vietnam was a success due to the lack of popular support and the British coin with American support to counterinsurgency. So, it turned out differently between Vietnam. Vietnam was a loss. Indonesia was a success. Malaysia was a success. So we saw Vietnam, full-blown war. We saw Indonesia using death squads and intelligence apparatus to hunt communists. And then we saw Malaysia and how we had kind of both. So you had one spectrum was more hands-off using second, third order effects through strategic shaping, and that was Indonesia. And then we look at Vietnam. Vietnam was straight up fucking war. And then we had Malaysia in the middle, which was a happy metric of measurement. So because of that, that shaped how we were going to go into South America. Cuba, everybody knows Cuba sucks right now. It's been sucking since the communists took over. And because Batista was overthrown, he was a piece of shit, but he was overthrown, we got scared. We said, hey, all those countries I just named were taken over by communists. And it was like, I think a third of the world's population lived and died underneath communism. And it was fucking terrible. And we're in our side of the world, all we have is Cuba. And we're like, fuck, it's a domino effect. I was talking about Africa has a domino effect, like one country, and then it leads to another, and all these commies come in, and they just
and then we go back to what we were originally talking about in the beginning of this.
Yeah,
look at our several institutions within the United States now.
Yeah,
years later.
Yeah,
decades later.
It should worry you. And like people are like, oh, they're just college kids. They're expressing themselves. No, they're fucking Nazis. If that's the term you want me to use, they're Nazis. They're pushing for arming the state. They're pushing for universal taxation. They're pushing to take away my right to free speech, the right for me to practice my religion, the right for me to say to live peacefully. That's what these people want, and everybody's just kind of sitting there going like, "Oh, it's not as bad as you think." That's every single fucking country I'm talking about had the same exact fucking idea. They're like, "Oh no, they're just college kids. They're just agitators. So for the unions, for the workers, that's how they sneak in."
Well, that's how it started.
Yeah,
the unions is how communism got its start.
Yes, and when the United States, when it comes to how unionization happened, it happened like 60 fucking years after it happened in Europe. It was brought over by socialists. It was brought over by, and I may get blasted for this, but secular Jews that ran the NKVD for the Russians that came over and brought socialism. And that's where a lot of anti-Semitism comes from, because you have your conservative or Orthodox Jews, not to be considered ultra-Orthodox like the Haredi, but a lot of the religious Jews and Zionists were like, hey, we need to save Judaism. A lot of the Jews, a lot of the Jewry that was social and secular wound up pushing communism hard. And that's why there's a lot of anti-Semitism due to those factors. Sorry, derailed a little bit. Bolivia and Argentina, we'll talk about them. We'll start off talking about them. Socialist government under a guy named Hugo Banzer. He was the Bolivian leader. He was a military officer, and he was a socialist. But real quick, how many coups do you think Bolivia has had since they became a country? Just take a gander.
Not looking at the notes.
Not looking at the notes. If you read ahead, that's fine.
I did.
Okay.
But if I had to guess, unknowing, I would say less than 100.
Less than 100? Okay. Yeah, they're at 190 since 1825. They've overthrown their government 190 times since 1825. So it lives up to its name because it was named after Simón Bolívar. Mm-hmm. When we saw this guy, he was elected. We saw this guy get elected. Now, he wasn't really elected. His government overthrew a previous government, and then they had a free and fair election. So you have this piece of shit socialist that's a closet communist And the U.S. is like, fuck, we can't do anything about Cuba. We have to prevent this from happening again. The U.S. was afraid of another Cuba, and Bolivia had a military leader who was a rabid leftist, and we basically funded right-wing officers to overthrow him, Bolivia. We set up what was called the School for the Americas in Panama, and there was a satellite place in Fort Bragg, and now called Fort Liberty.
Fort
Liberty.
Fort Liberty.
Fort Liberty.
Fort Liberty.
$22 million to rename our bases. Good job. Way to fuck that up. The School of the Americas was basically, so when we were taught how to do this method of warfare, we learned from the best, the Brits. And because they had an empire, they had people in India, they had people in Canada, all over the world, and Africa, and they had created intelligence apparatuses and agencies, and they had basically made a joint effort, a spectrum on how to combat insurgency and how to mold and shape and have different small groups fighting each other so that they can't actually fight the British power. So they wound up creating Camp X up in Canada. This was World War II. Between World War I and World War II. And it's where the Canadians and Americans sent their guys from the OSS. There was the OSE, the Office of, I think it's Strategic
Enhancement?
No, Executive. There's the OSE, which was the British version of the OSS. We had the OSS, which birthed the CIA and parts of the FBI, the paramilitary portions of the FBI, which all FBI agents, their wives have boyfriends.
Famous but incompetent.
Mm-hmm. Famous but incompetent.
I can't believe I almost went and became an FBI agent.
I'm glad you didn't turn out that way.
They try to get you.
Yeah.
For those of you that are still active duty, when you go to TRS and your bell's about to be rang, they'll start hitting you up.
Until you're looking for actual domestic law enforcement purposes of making this country better and keeping it safer. Only about a third or fourth of those FBI agents are actually worth a shit. The rest are just political attaches. They're the goddamn Gestapo. They're evil. Sorry, getting derailed again.
Schizocast.
Schizocast. So we basically took a bunch of military and intelligence personnel from different portions of the cone of South America. We brought them to Panama and we trained them on counterinsurgency and subversion. And we train them from everything on how to torture people to how to rig elections, how to assassinate people. And we did that under the guise of spreading democracy, which was fucked up on our part. Let's be honest here. Like, as much as I will jump for joy that a bunch of commies are dead, the way this came about was kind of bad. We basically created a death camp training death camp.
Yeah.
And we brought all the intelligentsia from the military, so that all the smart leaders, the command and staff, and then from the military to the intelligence. If we look at that as two overlapping circles, in the middle is what we're talking about, which is the special operations, low intensity conflict, intelligence gathering, and then executing these types of operations for special reconnaissance or strategic shaping and special reconnaissance. So when we talk about that, we groom these guys so that not only can we be in charge of them and influence them, but we're training the trainer. All right. One of the things, like, you go to airborne school. It's a massive school in Fort Benning. It's the only place where you can create paratroopers in the United States Army now. They were older back in World War II. They had different camps, but every single person that goes there was not airborne. They come out airborne. This was not like that. This was a train the trainer. So we basically created instructors, and if you look at Bloom's taxonomy, at the very top, there's evaluate and analyze. At the very bottom, there's just regurgitate. And so it's a pyramid of adult learning. Airborne and School of Infantry would be at the very bottom. You come out as an infantryman.
Yep.
There's no course of action development. There's no analyzation or evaluation and creation. Now you go to certain schools in the U.S. military or the intelligence community, you come out and that's what your goal is. Yes, you can regurgitate it, but can you train somebody? And then can you evaluate and fix that to mold it to how you need to train the people in the future and how they can train people? So instead of having airborne school where you come out as just a jumper, it would be like if I created an airborne school that you could then go out and train people how to jump. And then maybe there were factors that we didn't anticipate, and we have new methods of inserting people, and you were never taught how to do it, but you figured out how to make it work for other people.
Yeah.
So we did that in Panama, and it was called the School of the Americas. And we just took some of the most evil people on earth and we gave them a lot of training and a lot of money. And then we sent them back. And we paid a lot of people that were very evil to go out and basically start this in the 60s and 70s. The School of the Americas really kicked off in the 70s, but where did I leave off? Oh, military personnel at Fort Bragg. We also had some people up in Washington, D.C. area, and there's some military bases there. We trained some signals intelligence guys and collection methods. We got these guys to train the trainer. We exported these techniques and training on how to crush dissent. Using the CIA and special forces and other special operation forces, we kept the U.S. out of another giant war like what we had been through in Vietnam and Korea. Like Korea was devastating. It showed that the United Nations couldn't do shit. If you look at Korea, there were over 50 countries fighting the communists, and we barely met them halfway. And then you look at Vietnam, we poured 56,000 American souls into that war, coincidentally as half of the opioid deaths from last year.
Damn.
Yeah. Double the Vietnam War death casualty rate is what we're currently dropping every fucking year, and it's going up. And that's being pushed by China. They're pushing fentanyl hard, because if they can do the same thing to us vicariously through second and third order effects through other non-state actors, they can push fentanyl and they can kill Americans and they can destabilize our country. And the same thing with TikTok. It's owned and it's propagated by these fucking communists. And make no bones about it, like the Chinese people were a thriving, beautiful culture, and communism went in there and gave them all asexual haircuts and shitty fucking attire. They look like fucking college kids that we have now, minus the
and then put the restrictions on birth in there too.
Yeah, which they're fucked. China's gonna collapse. It's going to collapse. It's insane. Sorry, got a little bit off topic. To save lives, we trained the worst of the worst. We wanted to win the war before it begins. We set up these people in governments to be anti-communists and to be mutually supporting. So we didn't just train the Bolivians to work for the Bolivians. We trained them to all work together. And with the interoperability, several countries helped each other kill and kidnap different dissidents. So if motherfuckers wanted in North Carolina and he flees to Tennessee, we can have an extradition warrant, right?
Yep.
Well, because of the different constitutions, you can't try somebody in Tennessee for a crime committed in North Carolina unless it's on a federal level. But if we consider those states as sovereign countries, you have to extradite them. And that causes people to take notice. So say the best equation or analogy is that if I committed a crime or I pissed somebody off in North Carolina and I fled to Tennessee, the Tennessee special intelligence guys will kidnap and kill me there. So that's what happened with this dude, Hugar Banzer. I screwed that up. It's not Hugar Banzer. Hugar Banzer was I left something
Technical difficulties.
Technical difficulties.
Move the TBI. Move it over. Move it over. There we go.
All right. So Hugo Banzer Suarez, it was born 10 May 1926 to 5 May 2002 is when he died. He was a Bolivian politician and military officer who served as 51st president of Bolivia. He held the Bolivian presidency twice from 1971 to 1978 in a military dictatorship, and then again in 1997 to 2001 as a democratically elected president. Banzer rose to power via a coup d'etat against the socialist president, Juan Jose Torres. No, that's the guy. I screwed this up. Torres was the guy, the socialist military officer that was overthrown. I completely botched that. I cut and pasted the wrong name. So Torres was the socialist officer that we were worried about after Cuba in Bolivia, and that's the guy who we overthrew. Basically, Banzer was repressive of labor leaders, clergy, indigenous people, and students from 1971 to 1978. He just basically kidnapped and killed whoever he wanted, using the people that we trained in the School of the Americas. So there, several thousand Bolivians were either forced to seek asylum into foreign countries, were arrested, tortured, or killed during this period known as the Banzerato.
So now that being said, does this play? Is this what is moving into this coalition of military dictatorship leadership that is going to another country to find these basically political, what they would consider to be political rivals that went into that are exiled, and they were going out kidnapping their families, and murdering them, and actually bringing them back to their original country, murdering them and then burying them.
Both
in their original country.
They would either hit them where they were at, or they basically illegally kidnap them and bring them back.
Put them on a plane. And
I say illegally kidnap.
There's not a legal way to kidnap.
So, like with anything that we don't understand, we tried to justify like an abhorrently corrosive and violent behavior in order to combat these leftists, and how we can just look at the massive amount of suffering that went down there, and understand that we played a part, like our tax dollars played a part. After Bolivia, there was Argentina. Argentina was, and he's probably the most famous guy out of this whole thing, named Augusto Pinochet.
Yep.
Augusto Pinochet. Sorry, that was Chile. Chile. He's the most famous one because he was probably the most affluent one. Then there was Argentina. So between Bolivia and Argentina and Bolivia having intelligence, and we'll get into the nitty gritty of the intelligence organizations in episode 2 of this, because they have there's the DICE, the NICE, the AAA. There's all these different acronyms. It's similar to how the U.S. is. We have intelligence. Basically, they took police and their version of police, which is the military. Police, their active duty military, and their intelligence operatives, they all started working together to do what we were just talking about, kill and capture these dissidents. And it gets kind of dark. There's forced appearances, massive movement of stealing babies from these people.
And I'm going to go ahead and jump onto that one just briefly. It wasn't just kidnapping kids, it was kidnapping newborns and forcing them to be adopted by families that were basically willing to play ball with them.
Absolutely.
And now a lot of those kids that were kidnapped, they don't even know that that's what happened.
Yeah.
Like they're middle-aged, like 40s, 50s.
They're our age.
Yeah.
They're our age.
They don't, and they have no idea that they were basically kidnapped, but not basically, they were kidnapped and then forced to be adopted by a family that was willing to play ball with that.
And imagine
dictatorship.
The parents of those kids not knowing where their kids at, taken.
No, if they lived.
Yeah, if they lived, a lot of them did.
Because a lot of them, they just smoked them and then took the kids.
Now, let's also look on, two things can be true at once. That can be a horrible, evil act of, forcing, basically orphaning and adopting these kids. But those people that this was happening to are proto-fucking Nazis. They were communists. They would have committed genocide beyond a scale we can comprehend. Is that justification? No. But when I think about it, I go, hey, I could kill 30,000 Nazis in 1929 to 1931 and stop World War II and stop the Holocaust. That was the justification. Henry Kissinger was the brainchild of this entire thing, and I'll talk more about him in episode 2 because we're going to talk about the players, and then we'll talk about the actions. Henry Kissinger, he was born in Germany, Bavaria, I believe, and he emigrated to the United States as a baby or as a small child. So he has a very thick German accent, but he came to the United States. He was Jewish, so they fled the Nazis. He wound up becoming a huge factor when it came to the Vietnam War. And because of what happened in Korea and Vietnam, we said, hey, we're not going to be rolling tanks and bombers, and we can't keep doing this and losing American boys to go die in some shithole country. Like, if you want your freedom, you can fight for it. We'll train and equip your own forces. We did that through proxy warfare.
Yeah.
And proxy warfare is the new warfare. And in fact, there's 5th gen proxy, like the 20 million illegals that came across the border. Is every one of them going to pick up a rifle and overthrow the United States? No, but you have enough people now here illegally that don't share our values and morals that have access to weapons and organization. There's a town in Texas that has about 30,000 fucking migrants. They created their own little city. The law doesn't go in there. There's drugs flowing across the border. You also have the unhoused population, homeless. There's 70,000 homeless people rolling around in the greater Los Angeles area. Mm-hmm. If there is no security and say there's an earthquake, which I believe there is going to be a very, very fucking large earthquake. You have people that have no allegiance to America, these unhoused people and these illegal immigrants. This is just setting it up. You're basically dousing the house in gasoline and waiting for somebody to spark a match.
Waiting for somebody to walk by and just...
And then everything falls into place. This has been set up for years by China. The fentanyl, the bribing politicians, they pay for Democrat politicians and Republicans, like those piece of shit Koch brothers. The Republicans are not anti-immigrant. They're anti-illegal immigrant, but there are a fuck ton of Republicans that want the money. So, like, even Bernie Sanders believes in closed borders. He's a socialist. But he understands that our country has been flooded. So you have now basically a 5th gen proxy war force, which are these illegals that came over, military fighting males, and they have nothing. Like, we have everything in America. That's why Americans aren't revolting. We have everything. These people are now living in America that have nothing. They're easy to look at their motivations and then to get them to do what you want. And so these politicians, they live and die by the dollar. And so they're getting paid exorbitant amounts of money by China. And so you have China basically setting up a guerrilla war here in the United States being funded by fentanyl. Same exact fucking thing we did to the South Americans. Same exact
So it
thing.
all fucking comes around.
Yep. Well, and you can look, and we're still meddling. Like the Ecuadorian president that just got elected, youngest president of Ecuador. He got elected, I think, yesterday. He's 35 years old. He's a Harvard grad. My neighbor, do you not think he is CIA?
Oh, he definitely is.
Absolutely. They call him a centrist. But anybody that's not a leftist in Central and South America is more than likely from some sort of CIA program from this era. And then you look at the leftists. A lot of the crazy leftists are being propped up by opposition. So how Democrats will vote for crazy-ass Republicans and Republicans will vote for crazy-ass Democrats. Because if I'm a Republican operative and I see two Democrats, one's like a blue dog Democrat, he's pro-worker, he believes in the American dream, the American family. Mm-hmm. And then you have a frothing at the mouth fucking psychopath that believes in the alphabet mafia, doesn't believe in the American dream. Americans are racist. All this stuff that we see with the squad. That Republican's going to be like, hey, this guy, the blue dog, he's going to be hard to beat. Let's fund this crazy person. So it knocks him out of the running. Now I'm running a crazy person. But when both sides do that, you have crazy people running against crazy people. Yeah, but like John Fetterman. That guy is in Congress and he can't put together a sentence and he's wearing hoodies and basketball shorts in the halls of fucking Congress. That building exists because thousands of Americans decided to say fuck you to the king and establish a country built on democracy. Now we have this fucking clown walking around. Just it looks like a 6-year-old at a fucking NASCAR rally. And he is in charge of our intelligence apparatus. He's in charge of our finances. He's in charge of us. And it's insane because the Chinese are doing the same exact fucking thing we did. They're setting the stage.
They're taking a book or taking a note from our book.
Yeah. Yeah. It sucks, but
history repeats itself.
I'm calling it. There's going to be a very large earthquake. I'm also calling that the homeless population is going to be a third party force. They're not going to be pro China, but they are going to be a problem for us. And you have the funding of fentanyl, and then you have the you have the infiltration of our higher education with leftists and socialists, for God's sake. And I'm coming all the way back to Israel and Gaza, and the realities of war, and seeing these people that are supporting Hamas, BLM. It's called the Red Green Alliance. You have Islamists, these hardcore Nazis that want to eliminate Jews, teaming up with the Red, which is the socialists, and the goal of socialism is communism. You have them working together now on American college campuses, calling for the destruction of America, the destruction of the nuclear family, and the eradication of Jews, pushing fucking genocide. And we're not talking like a couple small groups. We're talking about thousands. There's entire rallies going on across the world, and they're calling, like, they have swastikas. These are literal fucking Nazis. So if you say, hey, when this whole thing came about, I was kind of neutral. I didn't really care about Israel versus Hamas or the Palestinians. And I was very well educated on it. Like, we look at the West Bank. West Bank is occupied. It has settlements. It's under Israeli occupation. Gaza is not. Gaza was abandoned in 2005 and has been run by Hamas, who uses 500 million US and 600 million European dollars a year to fund their terrorist networks. You look at Hamas is fucking evil, but they're more like ISIS. And so the Israelis are fighting them. They're fighting Hezbollah, which are the Palestinians that are in Lebanon. Yeah. And those guys are backed by Iran, and they're a legit military force. Hamas wound up going out, raping and slaughtering thousands of Israelis that did not live in Palestine. Like, if we go to the 1947 or 1948 and 57 war, the Israelis won fair and square by themselves. No U.S. intervention, no U.S. help. They fought themselves against, up at one point, 8 to 11 Arab armies, depending on which conflict. In 1967, they also fought a major war and won again. And the Palestinians lost. And that's pays to be a winner. You lost. So now you have these Palestinians that are upset with the Israelis. And we've had multiple peace processes. They said, hey, Gaza is yours. You can do with it what you want. People are like, oh, it's an apartheid state. Absolutely not. There's not a single fucking Israeli living in Gaza. The Egyptians don't want them. They won't let them cross the border. Lebanese don't want them because they're dealing with Hezbollah. You look at the Jordanians. They're like, Israel's like, hey, you can take West Bank. We will give it to you. They're like, fuck no. We don't want those people. The Palestinians, in Palestine is a bastardization of the Philistines. It's the Greek word for the people that lived in those areas. Palestinian is not an ethnic thing. It's cultural, but it's not. There's no genetics associated. They are Arab. Yes, they're Arab. Similar to Arabs that live in Egypt, that live in Lebanon, that live in Syria, and that live in Jordan, the surrounding areas, Iraqis. But you're talking about a made-up thing. And you go on these college campuses and they're like, I support Hamas. I support these freedom fighters. They're slaughtering Israelis. And then now everybody's like, I can't believe Israel's fighting back. Like, they're bombing the shit out of them. They're basically doing a clear sweep. They're cutting Gaza in half and they're clearing and sweeping it. But those people, and we're talking about entire kibbutzim, like their villages inside Israel. This is not Palestine. This is in Israel. These guys come across the border. They attack the military bases. They overran them. Hey, I might get flack for this, but if you're an IDF and you're on a military base, you're fair game against the combatant. So when Hamas went in there and killed those Israeli soldiers, I don't support it, but it's a reasonable conflict. Like soldiers versus versus insurgents. It's basically fucking ISIS versus this Jewish fighting force. That's one thing. That's one thing to break down the borders and attack. And that's between two belligerents, people that are armed. These motherfuckers went in and just slaughtered civilians.
Yeah, they went into a music fest.
Yeah, they just slaughtered them. And that's not cool. Now, people are saying, well, you're against that, but you're not against the bombing of civilians in Gaza. No, I'm against that. Anybody with a fucking functioning brain is against that. You can't justify tit for tat. But let's talk about the rhetoric. Let's talk about the kernel. What is at the very heart of this? Israel would not be doing what they're doing if Hamas had not attacked them. And we don't see the same bombing campaign in the West Bank because West Bank isn't ran by Hamas. They're run by Fatah and the Palestinian Authority. the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. They're not much better, but they're not beheading children. They're not burning people alive. They're not raping women in their beds. Like, it's terrible. And then you have Iran backing some of these players. And people are like, well, this could spiral into a regional war, into a global war. Absolutely, because Iran is backing them. Iran has proxy forces in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and the Gaza and the West Bank. Israel has been teaming up with the Gulf states, and they were this close to a peace process with Saudi Arabia. People think this is a Jewish Muslim war. It's not. Israel is a political entity. And you have, on the Muslim side, you have Shias and Sunnis. Yeah. You have the Gulf bloc, which is basically Saudi Arabia, Oman, the UAE, Bahrain, Egypt, and parts of Lebanon. And then you have the Shia backside, and Iraq split down the middle between Shia and Sunni. You have Iran backing Syria, a third of Lebanon, and the West Bank and Gaza. And then you have the Turks. They're on the third echelon. They're the ones who helped France overthrow, or basically fought against France, the French overthrow of Libya in 2013. So the Turks are pushing hard. The Turks are the reason why Azerbaijan just invaded Nagorno-Karabakh, Artsakh, which is the Armenian enclave. There's a war. You
mentioned that, what, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah. No, so, and that brings in Russia. So Russia backed Armenia. Azerbaijan's backed by Turkey.
This is going to turn into a world war.
And then Israel backs Azerbaijan, but they're kind of neutral between Turkey and Israel. Turkey's backing the Palestinians. Then you have the Kurds. Then you have the secular SDF in Syria. Then you have the Assadists, which are Shia, or they're Alawite, but they're aligned with the Shia militias. Iraq split down the middle between Shia and Sunni. We can't really, we don't want the Shia to take power, but the Shias in Iraq don't want anything to do with Iran. Like Muqtada al-Sadr and the Sadrists, they're like, yeah, we're Shia and we are glad to be backed by Iran, but we're not doing their bidding. Then you have the Sunnis, which we left them alone, and they basically created fucking ISIS. So you have 5 or 6 different factions fighting each other. Now you add the Americans. People are upset right now because we're sending troops over there. We're going to be there'll be American boots on the ground.
We already sent a battle group over there.
Yeah.
Like right after it happened.
But we have citizens that were kidnapped. We have American fucking citizens that were kidnapped. This is probably the only thing that Biden has done that I fucking agree with. And then now you have all these idiots like Tucker Carlson being like, we shouldn't do this. It's what a fucking treaty is. They're our ally, a staunch ally. People say, oh, they collect on us. Bullshit. We collect on everybody else. Get fucked. I was like, dude, that's like driving a fucking diesel car and being like, I'm for the environment. Like Tucker Carlson, I agree with some of his stuff wholeheartedly on the domestic front, but internationally, he's a fuckwit when it comes to what's going on over there, because we are allowing a power vacuum where Russia attempted to fill it, and our intelligence agencies here in the United States said, hey, if Biden can't do this, our goal as an intelligence agency is to make sure America stays number one. So we will manipulate Biden as much as we want to keep the war going in Russia. And now you have Iran entering on this front. So you have the Ukrainian war, and now you have the Middle East war. So Iran's going to try and tie us up over there, and we're going to get into it. So Europe is fighting Russia with America backing. America is with Israel, and Israel has some neighbors that are helping or that are pro them against Iran. So it's turning into a giant fucking mess, and there's going to be a world war. Not on the scale of what we had as far as like dropping nukes in Normandy and shit like that, but you're going to see it, and it's going to be bad, and a lot of people are going to die, and you're going to have these fucking Nazis walking around on college campuses waving Hamas flags. That should scare you.
They're already doing, and they're doing it in Europe as well. All right. On that note, that is going to conclude part 1 of our Operation Condor series. We've got 2 more parts to this. We've got a Halloween episode coming up.
I'll wear drag. If you guys smash the eggplant emoji, I'll come in in drag.
I still got to figure out what costume I'm going to do for
I'll get all dolled up and you can look at my luscious nips. I'm just fucking around. No, actually, if you guys do say 10 eggplant emojis from different people.
Not the same. Not the same person.
Smash that eggplant button in the comments and I'll show up here in like a corset and a fucking wig.
Can it be like a powdered wig from like the olden days?
So you're talking like a colonial drag queen? Yeah. I might do that. for the clickbait, for sure. I'll take that hit. I'm not sucking any dicks. That's where I draw the line. I'll wear high heels, but no dicks. No dicks.
Jesus fuck. But all right, guys. That concludes this episode. We'll see you on the next one. And remember, if it's stupid and it works,
it's not stupid.
All right. See you guys on the next one. Be sure to hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't, because you're wrong if you haven't, and leave some comments for us to take a look at.
Hell yeah.